Okay, I know you don't read books, I noticed. But it's Friday, you ain't got nothing going on, so I'm gonna get you hip. 1984 was written in 1948 by George Orwell. It's a dystopian novel that predicts a very dark future. Unfortunately, a lot of predictions in this book have become all too real. So we're gonna talk about the top 5 predictions in 1984 that we're currently living through now. It might get a little spooky. Okay, so let's get into it. Top 5 predictions from 1984. Number one is mass surveillance. So in the book, they have what's called telescreens, which is basically a big screen, right? Usually in the center of your apartment that is used when Big Brother wants to communicate with you. Big Brother's face or the government will pop up on the screen and it takes you through your daily wake up, exercise. So everybody does it together. And whenever it wants to see what you're doing, it can just pop in and look at you. Now, obviously that a big screen in the middle of your living space sounds vaguely familiar. You might even be watching this video on one. Now, mind you, this was written in 1948, where televisions were obviously not popular. A lot of these predictions, while right now they sound like obvious, you have to consider the time frame in which they were written. Also in the novel, there's literally a bunch of hidden microphones all around that are picking up what you're saying and processing that and running it back to Big Brother. Now, I'm pretty sure you had the phenomenon of talking about something or even watching a video on something, and then you start getting advertisements for it. Now, I might be a little naive, but that sounds pretty much like the same thing. And actually, I would consider right now to be worse. So in this day and age, as soon as you walk out of your house, and a lot of times before you walk out of your house, basically everything you do is on camera, right? From people having Ring cameras and cameras around their house, right? To all this CCTV, you're probably on camera 90% of your day. Then you have when you're driving, at least in Florida, there's a lot of tolls. They're taking your picture every toll booth, basically. So there's really not anywhere you can go to escape being on camera. And while the government may or may not be monitoring these cameras continuously, ultimately, they have the ability to go back and gather whatever information they want later on hand. Another level higher than that is we have these cameras now that have facial recognition. They even have cameras, I know they've rolled it out in China, where it could kind of geo map you, right? Even if you have your face completely covered, right? Your walk, your height, weight, and all that, it could consider it to say whether that's you or not, right? So for me, right, if you have a certain little bop in your stroll, they can use that to identify you rather than your face or any other external features, which is a bit frightening. So the number 2 prediction that came true in 1984 is what you call thought control. In the book, obviously, they're spying on you via microphones and screens. Now, what they're listening for is what you would call subversive speak. That's basically going against the government's official narrative. They actually have what you call thought police. Now, this is a term that we use today, but there was an actual department in the book. Mind you, 1948, I'm gonna keep reminding you how long ago this was, where if you're saying something against the narrative that the government is pushing, they can come and arrest you. And then what they'll do is send you to basically a re-education camp. AKA, they're gonna torture you until you agree completely with what they're telling you is the truth. Now, again, while we don't have that in this society at such an aggressive level, we do have things like cancel culture. If you're saying something against what the government or the media official narrative, they can quote unquote cancel you. That means basically smear your name in the public and do a public PR campaign to try to make you public enemy number 1, to where that the masses turn on you. And then obviously monkey see, monkey do, you just become hated and irrelevant. What they can also do more tangibly is, with their control of the banking system, they can deplatform you and debank you. Obviously, with the central bank and the other banks that we have being debanked is what I would call a financial conundrum, right? It would suck to be debanked because obviously we live in a cashless society. So to a certain extent, you need to have a bank for most daily things. So these are two ways that the thought police will keep you in line rather than just being able to arrest you and torture you. Now, number 3. Truth manipulation. The main character in 1984, literally his job is to go into history and rewrite it. So imagine, for example, somebody overthrows this government and is a dictator, and they go in and they burn all the history books and they rewrite them and say that their lineage is that of kings and they need to be the king of this country, and they descend from George Washington or somebody. And that's why they need to be king, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, we know the truth, right? But through enough generations of reading that and being drilled that as actual facts, future generations will actually start to believe that, which is a scary proposition. One example from the actual book is that war equals peace, right? So the definition of war has been changed into peace, which sounds crazy. It's complete opposites. But if they can convince you to believe that, then it's a slippery slope. Everything else probably becomes easier, right? Because if you have two ideas that are so polar opposite and you can conflate them, then ideas that are a little bit closer and a little bit more nuanced, everything becomes a gray area. And basically you're just listening to what they tell you is the truth. Some obvious examples of modern day thought control. Obviously the media is controlled and they paint their own narrative. And if you don't believe me, literally turn on CNN and Fox News are supposed to be polar opposites, right? But they're telling you the same story. So if they can tell you the same exact story with 2 different perspectives and 2 different narratives, that shows bias, right? There's also fake news that's completely fake. I remember a couple years ago, they were talking about Joe Rogan was taking horse medicine for his COVID, and they even actually put a filter on him that turned him green to make him look sick when he contracted COVID, right? So that's completely fake news that they knew was fake, that they just used to spin a narrative. If you don't think they're rewriting history and redefining words, ask 100 people what a woman is. Now, if they can't give you the standard definition that's been passed down through the years, if they want to say they don't know, or they're confused, anything besides what you know to be the truth, we're not even going to get into it, but we know what a woman is, then their truth has been manipulated. Now, moving on, number 4. In 1984, there's endless wars. And the reason they do that is basically to control the population, right? So obviously wartime is not a nice thing and it's scary. So one thing is to use war to instill fear on the population. Fear on the population makes them more easily controllable. And the fact that these wars never end, they never break out of that kind of survival mode to be able to think more clearly. The world's set up a little bit, so there's only like a couple nations, but they're constantly at war. And then once war with 2 nations is over, then they'll pick wars with other nations so that they're constantly in a state of war. The modern day equivalent of that is, I would suggest since World War II, the US has not been in a war, technically, even if they're not fully hostile and fully even known about, right? Because you have World War II, then you have the Cold War, which isn't technically a war, but it really is. Then after that, you have Vietnam War, secret wars by the CIA and proxy wars. Then you move up into 9/11. Obviously, since 9/11, we've been in the Middle East. So there hasn't been a time that we haven't been in war since, I would argue, World War II. And then another spin I would put on that is the fact that if we're not in war against an actual country, we're in war against ideas. Fighting an idea is stupid and redundant, right? Because a war against terror can't really be one because terror is an idea or ideology. And then the fact that the US will go into other countries and bomb them, they're creating terrorists via their actions, right? So you're trying to stop terrorism while creating terrorists in other countries, because if somebody was to come to the US and blow up my house while I'm not in it and my whole family dies, obviously I'm gonna have a vendetta against that foreign nation, right? So you just created a terrorist where I could have been minding my business and going about my day. And then we have things like the war against drugs. So the war against drugs was to help the population of the US get off drugs and kind of abolish it. But at the same time, we're doing the war on drugs. It's been declassified that the CIA was funding cocaine into the US, into inner cities. So on one hand, you're fighting a war on drugs, and on the other hand, you're fueling the war on drugs. So when are we going to win that battle? Don't hold your breath. And the fifth and final parallel to today is a loss of privacy via technology. In the book, they're using microphones, telescreens, whatever other technology at their disposal to be able to constantly surveil and spy on you. Today it's a lot more wicked because I feel like everybody is complicit in their own loss of privacy. What do I mean? Well, you have computer screens, you have telephones, you have TVs, you have digital assistants such as Google and Alexa. For example, hey Google, are you listening?
Yes, what can I help you with?
Right, my point exactly. So what I'm saying is that these technologies technically aren't necessary to live your life. They make it easier. You can live without a smartphone. There's people that do it in this country and there's people that do it all over the world. You can live without a laptop, you can live without Alexa, Google, Siri, right? ChatGPT even. But it's less convenient. As you can see, I'm just as guilty as anybody, but I'm cognizant of that fact. I feel like there's people giving their privacy away that either aren't cognizant of it or just don't care. You have to understand the ramifications of what you're doing. People that have been cognizant of it have created marketplaces to kind of counteract it, right? Such as VPNs, virtual privacy network, and other things like that to kind of counteract it, because it is kind of a scary gray area, right? While these technologies are great, useful, and can be productive to use, the trade-off is our everyday privacy that we're kind of taking for granted. If I was sponsored by a VPN, I would suggest one to you, but I'm not sponsored yet by a VPN. So you can do your own research into that. But what I am saying is kind of start being more aware of your technology's capabilities, not just how to use it, but how it can be used harmfully against you. Another thing that points me into this direction of probably wanting to use less technology is the fact that tech billionaires and CEOs don't allow their products to be used by their own family, right? Steve Jobs' children didn't have iPhones. I wonder why that is. Is it possibly because they've gathered all this information and they know how it can negatively affect their families? Now, while I'm not the Unabomber and I'm not telling you all technology is evil, I'm just suggesting another perspective to look at these things at. Right? And my last little point I want to make on this technology is, if you've ever seen the South Park episode where you're blindly just consenting to things, right? For your Apple update. And then they come and they are able to take you away because you signed it. I feel like while it's not that drastic, that's something that can possibly be used against you in a dystopian future society. Because if you have a legal contract that you signed, that you agreed to, then you kind of don't have a leg to stand on. While you may not be a big reader, would that change if you read a book that could possibly predict the future? In my argument, I would say 1948, remember the book is 1984, but it was written in 1948, and to have this much accuracy falls within the level of psychic or fortune teller. So maybe that can be a reason for you to pick it up and check it out, or check out his other works, such as Animal Farm, which is more of a sociology allegory used via animals. But all that said, I did my best to take you back to the future. That's the video for today. Hope y'all enjoyed it. I'm out.